Stoicism is an ancient Roman and Greek philosophy that is perhaps best conceptualized by our modern military in the form of military bearing. It is the art of living virtuously through reason, self-control, and the acceptance of what is beyond our control. Although these principles are slightly different in the military, such as respect for hierarchy and outward presentation as a cohesive unit, these attributes directly relate to all three constructs of Stoicism, with the understanding how even the weakest member of a group affects the group as a whole. After all, what we do most certainly affects other people. And if we truly live in a progressive society, then we most certainly share some responsibility to others around us. Ironically, it is a lack of these three tenets that often brings some individuals into my therapy practice, such as the futile attempts towards controlling others, inability to examine the self, and problems assessing what a person does have influence over. As a military reference, this is exemplified in basic training, where a division unwillingly suffers the unavoidable consequences for another person's actions, and how the division could have prevented such a behavior associated with their comrade. In the vast and intricate cosmology of the Urantia Book, Stoicism emerges not merely as a historical philosophy, but as a poignant reflection of humanity's striving toward moral excellence and spiritual insight in the absence of revelatory clarity. The Urantia Book, particularly in 121.4.3, offers a concise yet profound commentary on Stoicism as one of the dominant philosophical currents of the Greco-Roman world during the time of Jesus. It situates Stoicism as one of four major schools of thought: Epicureanism, Cynicism, Skepticism, and Stoicism itself, that shaped the intellectual and moral landscape of the Gentile world. Of these, Stoicism is portrayed as the most elevated in terms of moral aspiration and spiritual potential, though ultimately limited by its failure to evolve into a religion due to its strong internal locus of control. After all, you do not need to be in the military to suffer the consequences of betrayal, adversity, disease, and aging, in which a Stoic person spiritually finds themselves in their own element. The Stoics, according to the Urantia Book, believed in controlling reason fate that governed all nature. This concept, reminiscent of the logos in Hellenistic thought, posited a rational principle permeating the cosmos, to which human beings could attune themselves through virtue and reason. The Stoics taught that the soul was divine, imprisoned within the corruptible body of physical nature. Liberation, then, was achieved not through external conquest, but through internal harmony, living in accordance with nature and the divine order. Virtue in this schema was its own reward, and moral excellence was the highest good. This emphasis on inner discipline, self-control, and moral integrity resonated deeply with the nobler classes of Roman society, offering a framework for ethical living amid the turbulence of empire and the decay of traditional religious structures. Yet the Urantia Book is careful to delineate the limitations of Stoicism. While it ascended to a sublime morality, ideals that, in the celestial author's view, have never been surpassed by any purely human system. It only remained a philosophy. It did not become a religion. The Stoics professed to be offspring of God, yet they failed to know God as a personal loving father. Their conception of divinity was abstract, impersonal, and deterministic. They sought to align their minds with the harmony of the universal mind. But they did not envision themselves as children in a familial relationship with a divine parent. This, according to the Urantia Book, was a critical shortcoming that prevented Stoicism from fulfilling its spiritual promise. The narrative of Stoicism in the Urantia Book is thus one of noble aspiration constrained by philosophical abstraction. The antithesis associated with Stoicism can be found littered throughout the entirety of the Urantia Book, as it begins using terms of service and sensitivity, in 72.15, indifference in 79.16, and spiritual laziness found in 103.5.7. Oftentimes, as a therapist, I hear individuals discredit all the positive changes they make in their lives towards leaning too heavily on temporal problems in their lives, rather than simply coming up with solutions to those temporary dilemmas. In 69.8.6, the authors indicate that despite its atrocities, that even slavery could have been once cited as being a temporary bridge from the chaos and indolence of primitive man towards the hard work and merits of no longer taking the easy road, which was once upon a time simply murdering them. As life becomes far more complex, so too does its solutions. With slavery, it was a temporary stay of execution that eventually, as the centuries progressed, taught the dominant culture of that time to become more accepting of and eventually realize their ultimate equality to all peoples on the planet. In other words, found in 47.8.7, that we are
becoming more and more durable as you leave behind the coarse vestiges of planetary animal origin. Coming up through great tribulation serves to make glorified mortals very kind and understanding, very sympathetic and tolerant.
The Urantia Book's treatment of Stoicism is not merely historical, it is theological and philosophical. It invites the reader to consider the role of philosophy and the evolution of religious consciousness. Stoicism, like many other great philosophical systems, represents a stage in humanity's spiritual development, a bridge between primitive religion and the higher revelations of apocalyptic truth. It is part of the soil in which the seeds of Christianity were sown, preparing the Gentile world for the transformative message of Jesus that was far-seeing enough to allow the current inflexibility of one's peers, such as the Pharisees that denied Jesus. Paul, the apostle of the Gentiles, is noted in the Urantia Book as leaning heavily towards Stoicism in his writings. His famous declaration,
I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content,
found in 121.4.3, reflecting the Stoic ideal of equanimity and inner peace. Yet Paul transcended Stoicism by embracing the personal God revealed in Jesus, the loving Father who seeks relationships with his children. This transition from Stoic resignation to Christian hope is emblematic of the spiritual evolution that the Urantia Book seeks to illuminate. Stoicism, for all its grandeur, lacked the warmth and intimacy of personal deity. It offered strength but not comfort, virtue but not grace. The Urantia Book honors Stoicism for its moral clarity and philosophical rigor, but it also points beyond it to a higher synthesis of truth, beauty, and goodness beginning in 1.17, a synthesis made possible by the revelation of the Universal Father and the ministry of the Paradise Sons. In this broader cosmological context, Stoicism can be seen as a reflection of the adjuster's influence within the human mind. The thought adjusters, as described in the Urantia Book, are fragments of the Universal Father, indwelling in the minds of mortals. They seek to elevate human thought, inspire moral action, and guide the soul toward eternal survival. We also learn in 113.4.3 that
to accept the guidance of a seraphim rarely means attaining a life of ease. In following this leading, you are sure to encounter, and if you have the courage to traverse, the rugged hills of moral choosing and spiritual progress.
And as Jesus once said in 143.15,
I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who despitefully use you.
As a friendly reminder, even the choice to say or do nothing could be divinely inspired. Initial research conducted by a Dr. Albert Merbian in 1970 suggested, despite his results varying in subsequent studies, that body language and voice inflection constitutes roughly 93% of overall communication, with only 7% being the very few words that we are currently using. For instance, a long pause can be an effective tool if we wish to encourage the person across from us to think about what they had just said. To give you guys a quick demonstration of voice inflection, I'm a huge fan of Canadians' uptalk, since such practice typically demonstrates when a person is done talking, which I believe is something most Americans could put to good use. When it comes to Stoicism, with its emphasis on virtue, reason, and inner harmony, it may be understood as a philosophical echo of the Adjuster's work, a human response to the divine presence within, albeit that one lacks the fullness of revelatory insight. The Stoic ideal of living in accordance with nature parallels the Adjuster's goal of aligning the human will with the divine will. Yet without the knowledge of the Adjuster's identity or purpose, Stoicism remains incomplete. The Urantia Book's portrayal of Stoicism also invites reflection on the nature of religion itself. After all, what distinguishes religion from philosophy? According to the book, religion is the experience of spiritual communion with the divine found in 155, 5.12. A personal relationship that transforms the soul and reorientates the self toward eternal values. Philosophy, by contrast, is the pursuit of wisdom through reason and reflection. In 131, 3.5, we learn that
no religionist may hope to attain the enlightenment of immortal wisdom, who persists in being slothful, indolent, feeble, idle, shameless, and selfish. But whoso is thoughtful, prudent, reflective, fervent, and earnest, even while he yet lives on earth, may attain the supreme enlightenment of the peace and liberty of divine wisdom.
Stoicism, for all its nobility, remained only a philosophy because it elevated the person and not the divine. It did not inspire worship, prayer, or the sense of divine sonship. It cultivated moral strength, but not spiritual intimacy. In this sense, Stoicism represents the pinnacle of human philosophy, but also its limitation. It shows how far reason can take us and where revelation must begin. The Urantia Book's narrative of Stoicism is thus both appreciative and critical. It honors the Stoics for their moral heroism and philosophical depth, while also pointing to the need for spiritual revelation to complete the human quest. This human quest directly relates to the self-actualizing God Almighty, since Stoicism most certainly taps into this inner strength, or might that is unique to those who experience creature status. This dual perspective reflects the book's broader vision of the interplay between human effort and divine grace, between philosophy and religion, between reason and revelation. Stoicism is part of the human story, a chapter in the unfolding drama of spiritual evolution. It is a noble attempt to live well in an age of uncertainty, to find order in chaos, and to cultivate virtue amid suffering. For those of you that are stoic enough to believe in yourselves and exhibit patience and flexibility towards others, one of the many prestigious avenues of eternal life that might be granted is to become a mighty messenger, or those in which have exhibited fierce loyalty to God on a rebellion planet such as our own, and have thusly been rewarded by the Trinity's divine embrace, found in 22:2.5. But simply weathering a storm, if you will permit the phrase, is not the final word. The final word, according to the Urantia Book, is love, the love of the Universal Father, revealed in the life and teachings of Jesus and experienced in the soul through the ministry of the indwelling Adjuster. In the context of the Urantia Book's teachings, Stoicism serves as a mirror for modern spiritual seekers. It challenges us to examine the foundations of our moral convictions, the sources of our inner peace, and the nature of our relationship with the divine. Are we living by reason alone, or are we open to the guidance of spirit? Are we cultivating virtue as an end in itself, or as a response to divine love? Are we resigned to fate, or are we embracing faith? The ultimate question for me circumnavigates nature of what true equality represents, since after all, God is no respecter of personalities, found in 112.0.12. In more advanced worlds than our own, we learn in 49.4.4 that
The young are usually born singly, multiple births being the exception, and the family life is fairly uniform on all types of planets. Sex equality prevails on all advanced worlds. Male and female are equal in the mind endowment and spiritual status.
Moreover, Stoicism's emphasis on self-mastery, self-worth, and inner strength resonates with the Urantia Book's vision of personality integration and soul growth. The book teaches that true religion harmonizes the mind, ennobles the character, and fosters unity of purpose. Stoicism, in its best expressions, aimed at such integration. It sought to free the soul from the tyranny of passion, to cultivate serenity amid adversity, and to live in accordance with higher spiritual principles. These goals align with the adjuster's work and the Spirit's leading. Yet without the assurance of divine sonship and the hope of eternal survival, Stoicism remains a noble but incomplete path. The Urantia Book also places Stoicism within the broader historical context of spiritual preparation. The Gentile world, dominated by Stoic and other philosophical currents, was fertile ground for the emergence of Christianity. Contrastingly, the book also warns us of the
Danger of universal suffrage in the hands of uneducated and indolent majorities.
a potential pitfall of the upcoming artificial intelligence wave, along with the growing belief in absolute and unconditional equality no matter the circumstance. The moral rigor of Stoicism, the democratic preaching of the cynics, the intellectual humility of the skeptics, all contributed to a cultural milieu receptive to the message of Jesus. Stoicism, in particular, prepared the minds of the nobler classes to appreciate the ethical teachings of the master. Yet it was the revelation of divine love, not philosophical reason, that transformed hearts and built the foundation of a new spiritual epoch. In this light, Stoicism may be seen as a precursor, a philosophical John the Baptist, towards preparing the way for the fuller revelation of truth. It pointed toward the divine, even as it struggled to grasp it. It cultivated virtue, even as it lacked grace. It honored reason, even as it yearned for revelation. The Urantia Book's narrative invites us to honor Stoicism for what it was, and to embrace the higher truth for which it prepared the way. This synthesis of appreciation and transcendence is characteristic of the Urantia Book's approach to human philosophy. It does not dismiss the efforts of the human mind to understand reality. Rather, it situates those efforts within a larger framework of spiritual evolution. Stoicism, like other philosophical systems, represents a stage in the ascent of thought, a noble attempt to discern the moral order of the universe. But it is revelation that completes the picture, that fills in the gaps, that transforms philosophy into religion. The Urantia Book, as a purported revelation, seeks to offer that completion, not by negating philosophy, but fulfilling it. Thank you again for watching today's video, your continued support, and I'll see you on the next one.